she thought she was hiring an event planner to design her daughter's birthday. A professional. A stranger. A man she had already erased from her life. But when Claire Danvers saw him again after 10 long years, she realized something terrifying. He wasn't just the man she divorced. He was the man who had been silently protecting her daughter all along. And the secret he carried was about to destroy everything she believed about their past. At 43, Claire Danvers had built a life that looked calm from the outside, but felt carefully contained on the inside. She lived in a quiet lakefront apartment on the north side of Chicago. Large windows. Soft light. Minimal furniture. Everything chosen with precision, as if excess emotion could be removed through design. And maybe that was why she became an interior stylist. Because controlling spaces was easier than confronting memories. Claire had learned, over time, how to function without needing much from anyone. She ran a small but respected design consultancy, working with affluent clients who admired her taste and professionalism. They praised her work. They trusted her judgment. But they never truly knew her. And that was intentional. Because Claire Danvers had once given someone access to everything. Her heart. Her future. Her trust. And it had ended in ruins. 10 years earlier, she had divorced the man she once believed would be her forever. Daniel Mercer. A quiet, gifted event designer with a reputation for turning ordinary rooms into unforgettable emotional experiences. He didn't just plan events. He created moments people remembered for the rest of their lives. And Claire had once been one of those moments. Their marriage had not ended with betrayal in the traditional sense. There were no public scandals. No screaming matches. No dramatic exits. It ended in something far more painful. Silence. Misunderstanding. An emotional distance that neither of them knew how to cross. Claire had believed Daniel chose his career over their family during the most fragile years of their marriage. Late nights. Missed conversations. Emotional absence disguised as ambition. And when their daughter, Lily, was still very young, the distance between them became something neither love nor time could repair. So Claire left. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she stopped believing she was loved back. What she never admitted, even to herself, was that leaving Daniel did not end the pain. It simply taught her how to live inside it quietly. She became structured, independent, emotionally guarded. Love, in her mind, had become a risk with no guarantee of survival. And she had a child now. A reason to never take that risk again. Lily, now 8 years old, was the only place where Claire allowed softness to exist. She was bright, curious, emotionally intuitive in ways that sometimes unsettled Claire. Because Lily asked questions Claire wasn't ready to answer. And recently, she had begun asking about her father more often. Not in anger. Not in blame, but in longing. That was what hurt the most. Because Claire couldn't give her daughter the version of Daniel she wanted her to remember. She could only give absence. And absence, over time, becomes its own kind of presence. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the apartment windows, Lily sat curled on the sofa beside her. She looked small in that moment. Thoughtful. A little too grown for her age. And then she spoke quietly. I want a real birthday party this year. Claire smiled gently. We always celebrate your birthday, sweetheart. Lily shook her head. No. I mean real. Like the ones Daddy used to plan. The word landed like a crack in glass. Daddy. Claire's hands froze slightly around her coffee cup. Because she knew exactly what Lily meant. The lights. The music. The immersive themes. The way Daniel once turned birthdays into entire worlds. And for a moment, Claire saw it too clearly. A version of their life before everything broke. Before misunderstanding hardened into distance. Before love became something they stopped fighting for. Lily continued softly. I want something magical again. Claire didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, she knew exactly who could create that magic. And she had spent 10 years trying not to think about him. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Claire stood alone in her kitchen longer than usual. The apartment was silent. Too silent. And for the first time in years, she asked herself a question she had avoided completely. What if I was wrong about him? But she didn't let the thought stay long. Because some memories feel too dangerous to reopen. The next morning, Claire did something she never expected. She searched for Daniel Mercer. His old company no longer listed him. No interviews. No public work. No trace of his once thriving career. It was as if he had deliberately stepped out of the life he once built. That should have reassured her. Instead, it unsettled her more. Because people don't disappear without reason. They disappear because something forced them to. After days of searching, she finally found a number tied to independent consultations. Her finger hovered over the call button for nearly a full minute. Her pride whispered not to. Her memory whispered louder. And finally, she pressed call. When he answered, his voice stopped time. Daniel Mercer. Still calm. Still controlled. But something in it was different now. Worn. Sharpened. Colder. Claire hesitated. Then spoke anyway. It's Claire. Silence. Not surprise. Not anger. Just silence that stretched too long. Finally. I don't do private family events anymore, he said. His tone was final. Detached. Professional. Claire tightened her grip on the phone. It's for Lily. Another silence. Longer this time. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't ask about her life. He only said, "I'll do it." And then the line went dead. Claire stood there for a long time afterward, staring at nothing. Because she expected resistance. Questions. Emotional distance. Anything that made sense. But not agreement. Not so quickly. And definitely not without emotion. Something about it didn't feel like closure. It felt like a door reopening that should have stayed shut. 3 days later, Claire received the venue details. A restored botanical hall on the edge of Chicago. Glass ceilings. Natural vines. Soft, fading architecture that looked like time itself had paused inside it. It was beautiful. Almost too beautiful. As if chosen by someone who remembered how she once dreamed of things like this. And that was when Claire realized something unsettling. Daniel hadn't just agreed to the job. He had chosen a place that meant something. Something she didn't understand yet. Before we continue, if stories about love, second chances, and emotional healing mean something to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Because sometimes the most powerful love stories aren't about falling in love the first time. They're about finding your way back after everything fell apart. Now, let's continue. Do you believe it's truly possible to love someone again after years of pain and silence? Or does some distance become permanent? Share your thoughts below. The first time Claire saw Daniel again, she almost didn't recognize him. Not because he had changed completely, but because he had become someone she no longer knew how to read. The botanical hall was quiet that morning. Sunlight poured through the glass ceiling in soft golden streams, touching the marble floor like liquid warmth. Vines curled along the walls, carefully preserved, as if the building itself remembered how to breathe. Claire stood near the entrance holding a folder of design notes. She told herself she was early. She told herself she was in control. But the moment footsteps echoed across the hall, something inside her shifted. Slowly, she turned. And there he was. Daniel Mercer. He stood in the center of the space like he belonged there more than anyone else. Dark coat. Simple shirt. Hands in his pockets. A posture that wasn't casual, but contained. He wasn't the man she remembered. He looked quieter. Heavier. As if time had carved something out of him and left the outline behind. His eyes lifted. And for a moment, neither of them spoke. Not because they had nothing to say, but because too much existed between the silence. Finally, Daniel broke it first. Still choosing places that echo, he said calmly, glancing around the hall. Claire blinked. I didn't choose it. It was available. A faint pause. Then, you always used to say empty spaces feel honest. That sentence hit her harder than she expected. Because she had said that. Years ago, when they were still trying to understand each other. Claire straightened slightly. People change. Daniel nodded slowly. They usually do. But his eyes didn't leave her face. And that was the problem. He wasn't looking at her like a stranger. He was looking at her like someone he used to know too well. They walked through the venue together. Professionally. Carefully. Like two people pretending history didn't exist between them. Daniel reviewed the layout quietly. Claire observed him more than she meant to. He still had that calm precision in his movements. Still noticed details others missed. Still paused slightly before making decisions, as if thinking several steps ahead. But there was something different now. He wasn't performing confidence. He was carrying restraint. "You're still chasing perfection," Daniel said lightly, adjusting a floral placement. "And you're still criticizing everything," Claire replied before she could stop herself. That earned the smallest reaction from him. Not a smile exactly. But something close. Faint. Almost nostalgic. Claire looked away first. Because that reaction did something dangerous. It softened the past. And she couldn't afford that. Not again. As they worked, conversation became unavoidable. At first, it was logistics. Timeline. Lighting. Theme structure. But slowly, something else began to seep in. Fragments of memory. Unspoken history. Emotional residue neither of them had cleaned up. At one point, Daniel paused near a glass wall. "This place would have been good for Lily when she was younger," he said casually. Claire stiffened slightly. "She doesn't remember much from those years," she replied. A lie? Or at least, half of one. Because Lily remembered him more than Claire ever expected. Daniel nodded slowly. "I know," he said quietly. And something about the way he said it made Claire look at him again. There was no defensiveness. No bitterness. Only awareness. Like he had accepted something she hadn't even considered. Later that day, while reviewing seating arrangements, Claire found herself speaking without meaning to. "She talks about you sometimes." Daniel stopped writing. But didn't look up. "What does she say?" Claire hesitated. Then admitted softly. "That you used to make things feel magical." Silence. Longer this time. More fragile. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice was quieter. "I wasn't always good at everything," he said. Claire glanced at him. "I know." Another pause. Then Daniel added, "But I was good at that." And something in his tone cracked slightly at the end. Not sadness. Not pride. Something in between. For the first time in years, Claire saw something unfamiliar in him. Not the man who left. Not the man she blamed. but someone who had lost something too. When Lily arrived later that afternoon with Claire, everything changed. The moment she saw Daniel, she froze for half a second. Then, "Daddy." The word wasn't uncertain. It was hopeful. And it landed like a wound reopening and healing at the same time. Daniel crouched slightly to her level. "Hey, Lily." And something broke in Claire's chest watching it. Because Lily didn't hesitate. She stepped forward and hugged him. Like no time had passed at all. Like absence had never happened. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief moment. Just holding her. Not tightly. Not possessively. Carefully. Like something fragile he was afraid to lose again. Claire watched from a distance. And for the first time, she didn't feel anger. She felt confusion. Because this didn't look like abandonment. It looked like loss. Shared loss. After Lily ran off exploring the venue, Claire and Daniel remained standing near the floral archway. Neither spoke immediately. The air between them had changed. Less defensive. More exposed. Claire finally said, "You're different." Daniel didn't look at her. "I had to be." That answer wasn't dramatic. But it carried weight. Too much weight. She studied him. "What does that mean?" A pause. Then Daniel exhaled slowly. "It means some things don't let you stay the same." For a moment, Claire almost asked what things. But something in his expression stopped her. Not anger. Not avoidance. Something closer to exhaustion. Like the question had already been lived through too many times. Have you ever met someone again after years, and realized you never actually understood them the first time? Over the following days, their meetings became routine. But not comfortable. Not yet. They worked around each other like professionals forced to share emotional space they didn't fully trust. And yet, small moments kept slipping through. A shared glance. A half-finished sentence. A memory neither of them corrected. Claire noticed something she couldn't ignore. Daniel never dismissed Lily's ideas. He listened to her like she mattered. Not as obligation, but as intention. And that unsettled her more than she expected. Because it didn't match the version of him she had built in her mind. One evening, Claire arrived late to the venue. The lights were dimmed. The hall almost empty. And then she saw him. Daniel, sitting alone on the steps of the platform, sketchbook open, light from string bulbs casting soft lines across his face. She hesitated. Then stepped closer. "You still work like you're trying to prove something," she said quietly. Without looking up, he replied. "And you still pretend you don't feel anything." That stopped her. Not because it was cruel, but because it was accurate. Too accurate. Silence stretched. Then Daniel finally asked, "Do you ever think about why I really left?" Claire stiffened. "You left because work mattered more." A beat. Then. "No," Daniel said softly. "That's what you decided." And just like that, the emotional ground between them shifted. Claire didn't respond, because suddenly she wasn't sure anymore. And for the first time in 10 years, she realized she might not know the truth at all. If someone you loved told you your entire version of the past was wrong, would you want to hear the truth? Or would you be afraid of what it might change? After that night on the steps, something between Claire and Daniel changed. Not openly, not dramatically, but permanently. They stopped interacting like strangers forced into collaboration, and started interacting like two people trying not to acknowledge they still remembered each other too well. The next few days at the Botanical Hall became a rhythm. Morning meetings, design revisions, late afternoon adjustments. And between all of it, silence that was no longer empty. It was charged, careful, full of things neither of them dared to say out loud. Claire noticed it first in small moments. The way Daniel always adjusted lighting slightly warmer when Lily was expected to arrive. The way he softened his tone when explaining things to her daughter. The way he never once treated Lily like a project, only like a person. And that unsettled Claire more than she wanted to admit. Because it didn't fit the narrative she had carried for 10 years. The narrative that Daniel left because he didn't care enough. But care was everywhere now. One afternoon, Lily was sketching her dream birthday setup on the floor of the hall. Claire was reviewing guest arrangements nearby. Daniel sat with Lily, helping her draw a carousel. Their shoulders almost touched. Not romantic. Not intentional. Just close. Natural. "Can the horses be purple?" Lily asked. Daniel nodded. "They can be anything you want." Claire glanced up at that. "Even realistic design has limits," she said lightly. Daniel didn't look at her. "That's why children design better things than adults." Claire paused. That wasn't criticism. It was observation. And it stayed with her longer than expected. Over time, something unexpected formed. Respect. Not forced. Not polite. Earned through observation. Claire began noticing how Daniel worked without ego. How he adjusted ideas without defensiveness. How he always checked details twice, not for perfection, but for meaning. And Daniel noticed Claire too. How she softened when Lily laughed. How she pretended not to care about small emotional moments, but always remembered them later. How she controlled everything except the moments that mattered most. One evening, Daniel said quietly, "You haven't changed as much as you think you have." Claire looked up from her notes. That sounds like criticism. It isn't, he replied. It's recognition. And that hit differently. Recognition. Not judgment. Not distance. Understanding. But healing never stays stable for long. Especially when the past refuses to remain buried. It started subtly. A phone call Daniel received during a meeting. He stepped outside quickly. Too quickly. His tone dropped lower when he spoke. Controlled. Careful. Almost guarded. Claire noticed. But didn't ask. Not yet. Then there were the documents. She saw them accidentally when dropping off design sketches at his temporary workspace. Financial records. Legal notices. Medical invoices. All partially hidden under a folder labeled private. Claire didn't open them immediately. But the label alone made her pause. Because people don't label things private unless there's something to hide. That evening, Claire confronted him gently. Too gently, maybe. You've been busy outside of this project. Daniel looked up from his sketches. A pause. Yes. Not defensive. Not dismissive. Just honest. Claire hesitated. Is everything okay? Another pause. Longer this time. Yes, he repeated. But this time, it didn't sound complete. And Claire felt it. That invisible wall again. The same one from years ago. But now she knew what it felt like to stand on the other side of it. And she didn't like it. The emotional tension would have broken them apart. If not for Lily. One afternoon, Lily ran into the hall excitedly. Daddy! Mommy! Look what I made! Claire froze at the word. But Daniel didn't. He simply turned. And smiled. It wasn't forced. It wasn't strategic. It was real. Lily held up a drawing of all three of them inside a glowing garden. Are we all going to stay together this time? She asked innocently. The question hit harder than either adult expected. Claire looked away first. Daniel didn't answer immediately. And that silence said too much. After that, something softened. Not the past, but the present. Claire began staying longer at the venue. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to understand how Daniel worked now. Daniel, in turn, started including her in decisions more naturally. Not as obligation, but as equal voice. One night, while adjusting lighting plans, Daniel said, "You're still good at this." Claire didn't look up. "So are you." A pause. Then Daniel added quietly, "We always were. Just not together." That line stayed in the air longer than either of them expected. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Claire found herself waiting late at the hall one evening. Daniel was supposed to return for final adjustments. But he didn't arrive on time. When he finally did, he looked different. Tired. Distracted. Carrying something heavier than work stress. Claire noticed immediately. "You're late." Daniel nodded slightly. "I had something to handle." "What kind of something?" A pause. Long enough to feel intentional. "Something I can't ignore." That answer wasn't wrong. But it wasn't complete either. And Claire felt it again. That gap. That distance. That part of him she couldn't reach. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. Not because she was angry, but because she was confused. She kept replaying everything. The way Daniel looked at Lily. The way he worked. The way he paused before answering certain questions. And slowly, something dangerous formed in her thoughts. Not suspicion. Not fear. But curiosity. Because the version of Daniel she remembered was not the version standing in front of her now. And she didn't know which one was real anymore. If someone you once trusted begins to feel like a stranger again, do you ask questions? Or do you protect your heart by not asking at all? The next morning, Claire would make a decision that changes everything. She would look closer at what Daniel was hiding. And what she finds will break the fragile balance they've just begun to build. Claire didn't mean to look deeper. That was the truth she would later repeat to herself. But truth has a way of arriving when emotions are already unsettled. It happened the next morning. Daniel had stepped out to handle an urgent call. Lily was with Claire, drawing quietly near a table covered in fabric samples. The hall was empty. Too quiet. And on the corner of Daniel's temporary workspace table sat a folder. Unclosed. Unhidden. Almost as if it had been waiting. Claire hesitated. For a long moment, she simply stared at it. Because she already knew, some part of her already knew, that opening it would change something. But not opening it felt worse. Her fingers touched the edge of the folder. And she opened it. The first page was a hospital document. Lily's name. Claire's breath tightened. Another page. Emergency admission. Another. Specialist consultations. Her eyes moved faster now. Searching. Connecting. Denying. And then she saw it. Payments. Not insurance. Not shared accounts. Personal transfers. Repeated. Large. Sacrificial. Her heart began to pound. Because she recognized the dates. Those were the years she thought Daniel had been absent. The years she believed he had chosen work over them. But the truth was written in ink and receipts. He hadn't been absent. He had been fighting silently. Claire flipped another page. and froze. A termination letter from Daniel's former company. Reason? Unauthorized use of personal earnings for dependent medical expenses. Her breath caught sharply, because suddenly everything shifted. He hadn't left them. He had been pushed out. Not by choice. By consequence. And then came the final page. A handwritten note from Daniel attached to medical documentation. Claire read it slowly. Then again. And again. If she asks where the money came from, tell her it was mine. I don't want her to carry the weight of what I lost for her. Claire's hand trembled. The folder slipped slightly. But she caught it. Barely. Because suddenly, the man she thought abandoned her was the man who had silently destroyed his own life trying to save their daughter. Claire stepped back from the table. Her breath uneven. Her thoughts fragmented. No. No, this wasn't possible. This didn't fit. This didn't match the story she had lived for 10 years. Because she had built her entire understanding of the past on one belief. Daniel left because he didn't care enough to stay. But now, she saw something entirely different. A man who stayed too much. Too quietly. Too painfully. And she had misread his silence as absence. Daniel returned later that afternoon. The moment he walked in, he knew. Not because she spoke, but because she was holding the folder. His steps slowed. Not fear, but acceptance. Like he had always known this moment would come. Claire didn't shout. That was the strangest part. Her voice was steady. Too steady. Why didn't you tell me? Silence. Daniel set his keys down slowly. I didn't want you to know. That's not an answer. A pause. Then. It is, he said quietly. For me. Claire's eye sharpened. You lost everything. Daniel didn't deny it. Yes. And you let me believe you abandoned us. Another pause. Longer this time. I let you believe what made it easier to survive me. That sentence hit differently. Not defensively. Not emotionally dramatic. But broken in a controlled way. Daniel finally sat down. Not dramatically. Just tiredly. Like the truth had always weighed more than his body could carry. I was trying to keep Lily alive, he said quietly. Claire's breath caught. And I was trying to keep you from losing everything because of me. He looked down at his hands. They said I violated contracts. I didn't argue. I couldn't. I used my savings. Then my credit. Then everything I had access to. A pause. I didn't stop. Claire's throat tightened. You should have told me. Daniel shook his head slightly. you already saw me as someone who left. Another pause. I didn't think you'd believe I stayed. That silence broke something inside her. Claire stepped back slightly. Her voice softened without permission. I thought you chose work over us. Daniel looked up at her then. And for the first time, there was no distance in his eyes. Only exhaustion. I chose her, he said. A pause. Every time. That sentence didn't accuse. It didn't defend. It simply existed. And it rewrote everything. Claire's hands trembled slightly. Not from anger, but from collapse. Because she realized something unbearable. For 10 years, she had built her identity around being the one who stayed. The one who sacrificed. The one who endured. But Daniel had done all of that too. Silently. Alone. Without credit. Without recognition. Without forgiveness. And she had called it abandonment. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The hall felt different now. Heavier. Like truth had changed the air itself. Finally, Daniel said quietly, "You don't have to forgive me." Claire looked at him sharply. "That's not what this is." A pause. Then softer. "I already did something worse than not forgiving you." Daniel's expression tightened slightly. "What?" Claire swallowed. "I misunderstood you." Silence. And for the first time in years, Daniel looked like he didn't know what to say. That night, Claire sat alone in her apartment. Lily asleep. City lights reflecting across the glass. But her mind wasn't there. It was back in the hall. In the folder. In the silence between truths she had never asked for. She thought about all the moments she had judged him. All the distance she had assumed. All the pain she had attributed to neglect. And slowly, something changed inside her. Not romantic love. Not yet. Something deeper. Respect rebuilt through truth. And guilt softened into understanding. If you discovered the person you blamed for years was silently sacrificing for you the entire time, would you be able to forgive yourself for misunderstanding them? The next morning, Claire will return to Daniel. Not as his accuser. Not as his ex-wife. But as someone who finally sees him clearly. And what she says next will decide whether they break apart forever. Or begin again for the first time in truth. The morning light in Chicago didn't feel the same anymore. Claire noticed that immediately. It wasn't the city that had changed. It was her. She stood by the kitchen window, coffee untouched, watching the lake shimmer under pale sunrise light. For years, mornings like this had felt controlled. Predictable. Safe. But now, after the truth Daniel revealed, Safety felt like something she no longer understood. Because once you see someone clearly, you can never fully unsee them again. Claire arrived at the botanical hall earlier than usual. The space was empty. Still decorated. Still waiting. But now it felt different. Not like a project. Not like a job. But like a memory in progress. Daniel was already there. Standing near the floral archway. Hands in his pockets. Not looking at anything in particular. Just present. When he saw her, he didn't move immediately. Neither did she. Because both of them knew. This moment was no longer about design. Or logistics. Or even the birthday party. It was about everything underneath it. Claire spoke first. Her voice was quieter than usual. I read everything. Daniel nodded once. I figured. A pause. No tension. Just truth between them now. Claire stepped closer. I spent 10 years thinking you left us. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, but not defensively. I know. Another pause. Then Claire added. I was wrong. That sentence hung in the air differently than all the others. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just final. Honest. Daniel looked at her then. Really looked at her. And something in his expression softened. Not relief. Not victory. Just quiet exhaustion being understood at last. You didn't deserve what I thought of you, Claire said softly. Daniel shook his head slightly. It wasn't about deserving. A pause. It was about survival. That word stayed between them. Survival. Not love. Not loss. Survival. And Claire finally understood something she had never been taught before. Sometimes people don't leave because they stop loving you. They leave because staying would destroy everything they're trying to protect. Claire exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like she was holding herself together. It felt like something inside her was finally letting go. I don't know what to do with this, she admitted quietly. Daniel didn't rush her. He never did anymore. I don't either, he said. A pause. Then softer. But I don't want to disappear again. That line landed differently. Not as fear, but as truth finally spoken without defense. Later that afternoon, Lily ran into the hall again. Excited. Laughing. Completely unaware of the emotional storm that had just passed through her parents. Are we ready for my party now? She asked brightly. The innocence of her voice broke the heaviness instantly. Claire looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at Claire. And for the first time, there was no tension in the silence. Only understanding. Yes, Claire said gently. We're ready. And Daniel nodded. Let's make it something she'll remember. The day of Lily's birthday arrived like a soft, warm promise. The botanical hall transformed into something breathtaking. Lights hanging like stars. Flowers arranged like memory fragments. Music flowing gently through the air like breath. But the most important part wasn't the design. It was the people inside it. Lily ran through the space laughing, calling both of them, pulling them into moments they had once lost. Mom, Dad, come see this. And for once, neither of them corrected the word. Because in that moment, it didn't feel like history. It felt like healing. Later, as guests enjoyed the celebration, Claire stepped outside onto the terrace. The evening air was soft, warm, still. Daniel joined her after a while. Not immediately. Not intrusively. Just naturally. She's happy, he said. Claire nodded. She really is. A long silence followed. But it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was peaceful. Then Daniel said quietly, "I never stopped thinking about both of you." Claire turned slightly toward him. "I believe you now." And that sentence meant more than anything else she could have said. Claire took a breath. "I don't know what we are supposed to be now." Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because he didn't have a rehearsed answer anymore. So he said the only honest thing left. "Neither do I." A pause. Then Claire added softly, "But I know what we were." Daniel looked at her. "And I know now," she continued, "it wasn't what I thought it was." That changed everything. Because now, they weren't rebuilding a fantasy. They were rebuilding truth. Daniel stepped slightly closer. Not enough to overwhelm. Just enough to close distance that had existed for years. "I don't expect anything from you," he said. Claire looked at him for a long moment. Then replied, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." And that was the beginning. Not romance. Not resolution. Something more fragile. More real. Trust. Months later, life didn't become perfect. It became honest. Daniel continued working on select events. Claire continued her design business. And Lily grew up surrounded by something she had never fully had before. Two parents who were no longer fighting the past, but learning how to live inside the present. They didn't rush into anything. They didn't label it. They didn't force it. But sometimes, when Lily fell asleep early, Claire and Daniel would sit quietly in the same room. Not as husband and wife. Not as strangers. But as two people who had finally stopped running from truth. And in that silence, there was something new. Something steady. Something earned. Love didn't come back to Claire and Daniel the way it left. It came back changed. Broken in places, but honest everywhere else. Because sometimes love doesn't survive the version of us that misunderstood each other. But it does survive the version of us willing to understand again. Stories like this remind us that love doesn't end with heartbreak. Sometimes, it begins there. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional, mature romance stories. And tell me, if love came back to you after years of silence and misunderstanding, would you give it a second chance? Thank you for watching, and don't miss the next story waiting for you.